Good morning. It's my pleasure on behalf of our Board of Trustees to welcome everyone to this virtual town hall. At this moment, we have more than 300 people who are online. So to individuals across the campus, across the region, or across the globe, I want to first start by saying I hope that you're doing well. I hope that today finds you in a place in which you are safe, in which you are invigorated, in a place in which you are challenged intellectually, and in a place in which you are preparing for the start of the fall semester here on the campus of East Tennessee State University. As we look through all of the events that have transpired this calendar year, both on our campus, across the region, and across the nation, I had someone ask me the other day, how am I doing? And I quickly answered their question and they said, no, Dr. Noland, how are you doing? And I said, well, I'm a little nervous, a little apprehensive. There's a lot going on. But on the day that they asked me the question, my honest answer is I was upset. I was angered. I was disappointed. And in some respects, I was heartbroken. Because that question was posed to me last Wednesday. And last Wednesday, our nation was deep in conversations resulting from the murder of George Floyd. Conversations that were focused around equity, around inclusion, around race, around generations of disenfranchisement that have been placed upon African Americans all across our country. And as we began this town hall today, if we were together, I'd ask you the question, how are you doing? And if you are struggling, if you need help, guidance, or direction, please do not hesitate to reach out to the services available in our counseling center. There are people all across this community who are here to help. And it's within that theme of help that I would encourage all of us to reach out to a neighbor, ask that question and ask, what can I do to help? Because this concept of helping your neighbor, all of us locking arms together and moving forward is really going to define our success as we move through the remainder of this calendar year. And one of the things that I'm really proud of is the work that we've done over the course of the past couple of months as a university community to help one another, to help our colleagues, to help our neighbors, to help our faculty and our staff. And I think we as an institution have the opportunity to learn from that history because as Alex Haley said, unless we learn from history, we're destined to repeat it. And that's no longer merely an academic exercise, but may contain our world's fate and our destiny. Our ability as an institution to lead with passion, to lead with candor, to lead on multiple fronts is really going to define our success as we move through the remainder of the fall. Earlier this week, Dr. Keith Johnson put out an outstanding message, June 3rd, 2020. And if you've not read this, I would encourage you to do so. Dr. Johnson, thank you for your leadership. And in your letter to the campus, you really framed what a lot of us are thinking and feeling. This really is a time for East Tennessee State University to step forward and to lead. And I look forward to being a part of that process with you. As we went through the spring, we got towards the close of the semester, I put a video out asking individuals to take time to thank individuals who had impacted their educational career or their professional journey. And for months, I've written thank you notes. And for months, I've had thank you notes coming into my office. And I want to read a couple of these because the notes really help to capture the spirit that I think makes East Tennessee State University such a wonderful place to call home. And it's the spirit that's captured within these notes that is the spirit that I know will define the campus as we transition through the summer and welcome our students and faculty and staff back to the campus for the fall. So here's a note from April Cheyenne, who is an information research tech in our Office of Protection of Human Research Subjects. And she talks about the experiences that she has had as a student and employee and as the parent of a student. She gives a special shout out to her ETSU 1020 course for her son, her son's current professors, and Coach Azell and the women's basketball team. Her son suffers with autism, and the women's basketball team has wrapped their arms around him and made him a team manager. She goes on to say how her son has maintained A's and B's throughout his college experience and has grown both academically and socially. And the support that the institution has provided has made our hearts full. She goes on to thank her direct supervisor, Ms. Katie Sellers, and says, even though Katie is new to the area and to ETSU, she's embraced the mission and values of the university full force. She cares about the students and her team. Anything to make this adjustment easier for the IRB team during the semester, Katie has offered. She has been a support throughout this adjustment, and I'm thankful and feel blessed to have her as her director. Here's another note that came in from a staff member that thanks the university for its leadership, for its compassion, and that offers prayers to the university leadership so that we may have wisdom as we move through the decisions in the months to come. Here's a thank you note from Braden Trent, who was recently commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Army, a Roan Scholar, a graduate of Science Hill High School. Mr. Trent says, I want to thank you for everything that you and the university have done to have helped make me an Army officer. When I met you in high school, you welcomed me into the Roan class of 2020. Since then, the university has always been supportive of everything that I've done at ETSU, and I owe the university 1,000 thanks. I can't wait to return to ETSU after my career in the Army and maybe even take on the job of an ROTC instructor. Thank you again for everything that you've done and for everything that you can do for our university. And another note from a non-traditional student who was apprehensive about returning to receive their master's degree, but goes on in depth to thank our faculty and staff in the Department of Literature and Languages for the work that they have done to ensure that he realized his dreams. As Mark Hutton notes, the individual who sent this note, the faculty in that department, in fact, everyone that I've encountered at ETSU, are top-tier people and professionals. And I have letter after letter after letter such as these that I've received telling your story, stories in which we as an institution have gone above and beyond to meet the needs of our students and to meet the needs of our community during these unprecedented times. If you had told me in January that by the middle of this year, we would be facing the most significant pandemic that our nation has faced since 1918, I would have thought you'd slip something into my Diet Pepsi. If you would have told me that by June, we would be in the greatest economic crisis that our country has faced since the Great Depression, I would have said likewise. And if you would have told me that we would be facing the most significant social unrest since 1968, I would have thought you were crazy. And if you'd have told me all three would be happening at the same time, I wouldn't have believed you. But that's where we find ourselves. We find ourselves wrestling concurrently with three issues, and then you put all of that together and we're separated by distance. It makes things complicated. And I don't have all the answers to all the questions. I see the world in blue and gold. But unfortunately, we've got to see the world through a lot of green. And for those of you who know me, you know I despise the color green. But it's going to take a lot of colors coming together in dealing with uncertainty and embracing that uncertainty as we move forward into the summer and prepare for the fall. As we move into the fall, our spring has been defined by acts of grace and kindness. Those thank you notes define singular acts of kindness that together define our institution. And those singular acts of kindness, acts of grace, of compassion, and empathy are what allowed us in a 2-week time period to move all of our courses online. And ladies and gentlemen, we've done this already. We've done the hard work. Now it's time to gear up to do it again. But we can do this. That's what universities do. We solve hard problems. We take difficult issues, we see the green, and together we find solutions. And I look forward to finding those solutions with you as we prepare to open campus in the fall. The purpose of this town hall is to move through questions that have emerged since we've all received the wonderful work that Dr. David Linville's work group comprised in their phased reopening plan for East Tennessee State University. This is a document that was shared with the campus last week. The purpose of this town hall is to address questions that have emerged regarding this report. And I'd like to walk through the highlights of the report and then turn to your questions. So as we look through this report, what the report outlines are a series of 4 stages that will frame the activities of the institution, both currently, throughout the summer, into the fall, and then in whatever the future state may be for the institution in our new COVID-defined period of normality. Stage 1 is very similar to where we've been through the spring and to where we find ourselves as we've started the month of June. The bulk of that campus activity is from a remote location. The majority of our buildings on campus are closed. Our residence halls are open only to students with significant needs, housing, food insecurities, or other items that have caused them to have to remain on campus. Gatherings are limited to 10 individuals. All individuals must wear face coverings. And you can see the materials that are outlined within the report. As we transition to stage 2 and then to stage 3, the report outlines those criteria that define those stages. And then stage 4, which hopefully we can get to sooner rather than later, is the new normal. But if you have that report in front of you, I would encourage you to look through the materials on pages 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and on, because that begins to define where we're going to be as we prepare to open for the fall. Many staff across the campus have returned to their positions. Staff in grounds, custodial services have been back on campus in force for a couple of weeks as they move through deferred maintenance projects and just the basics of grounds and maintaining all the operations of the campus. Some staff have returned this week to begin to prepare for the public-facing opening of campus on July 1. And as we move from July 1 towards the beginning of the semester in August, we'll start working through the elements comprised within phase 3, which is titled Moderate Restrictions, and this information is found on the bottom of page 13 in the report. But as we move through these phases, I can assure you that it's our goal to provide operational latitude to department heads, to deans, and to the vice presidents. Units across our campus are diverse. There's not a one-size-fits-all solution to questions that may emerge within units. And at the beginning of the town hall, I talked about the phrase, be good neighbors and help your neighbors. Work with empathy, care, and compassion. We're going to afford multiple latitude to unit heads to make decisions that are within the best interests of their staff. If my coworker has a family member who is going through a fight with cancer and has chemotherapy treatments, we all are going to need to recognize that our coworker is going to need some latitude to work from home, to work remotely, because they may not want to put themselves in a position to take something home that could complicate the lives for loved ones. We may have a coworker who is struggling with access to childcare. So just as we all locked arms together and moved during the spring, we're going to need to do likewise as we move into the fall. But care, grace, compassion, empathy, and latitude is what's going to define our success as we begin to move through that opening process in the fall. One of the items that is clearly contained within the report is that life on campus in the fall is going to be different than life on campus in prior falls. All of us will wear face coverings. If we're in classroom settings, if we're in common settings across campus, there will be an expectation that protective devices will be worn. If a student comes in to campus one day and forgot their face covering, we'll have face coverings available in classrooms, but we all have to be good neighbors together. And I know that I've received a question around individuality and rights, but I go back to my training as a political scientist and the work of John Locke and the social compact. All of us are members of a wonderful democracy, but all of us are together members of an ETSU family and as a community as a whole. The last thing I want to do is to take a selfish action that could harm another. So if this makes me feel safe and it makes my neighbor feel safe, then let's all be good neighbors and work together to protect the health and safety of one another. So as we move through the phases of this report and as we transition through the fall, one of the things that we're going to see is that our classrooms will look different. Dr. Wilsey Bishop shared with me the beginning drafts of her implementation plan for Dr. Linville's report. And each of our major areas are working on their implementation plans. So we are working through aspects surrounding physical distancing in classrooms. I mentioned face masks will be required in classrooms. Seating arrangements will be different. Classrooms that may in the past have held 80 may now only have an occupancy capacity of 20. And folks are working all across the campus to reorient physically our classrooms so that when our students return for the fall, we are prepared to put you and our faculty and staff in environments that are safe. We are looking at ways in which our clinical, our lab, our studio and experiential courses are positioned so that they can prioritize in-person delivery. Our lab sections, our clinical sections, we're going to utilize simulation to the full extent that we can, but much of that work has to occur in person. We're also developing hybrid sections that could allow large lecture of 200 or more to occur in an online modality and then have breakout discussion sessions throughout the week. But we're giving latitude to our faculty to take their courses into flexible environments, just like we gave latitude to the faculty as they brought their courses online. We did not exercise a top-down process as we were going online, and to the fullest extent possible, I don't want to exercise a top-down process as we bring our courses back to campus. Our faculty own the curriculum, our faculty own their courses, and just as we did an outstanding job of transitioning in the spring, I know we're going to do an outstanding job of transitioning back to the fall. Because like I said earlier, that's what universities do. They solve big problems, and some of the problems that are on the horizon are among the biggest that we've had to solve in the history of this institution. But you all have the report. I don't want to spend the entirety of this public forum reading through this document. I would encourage you to do so. What I'd like to do is to try to address some of the questions that have come in. Wow, we've got 12 pages of questions that have emerged to date. So I'm going to do my best to move through the questions. I know that many of the questions deal with budget-related matters, and we will hold a separate forum to work through many of the questions that are emerging pertaining to budgets and changing budget paradigms at the institution. We all are following closely the activities that are unfolding in Nashville as our elected officials are working their way through what is projected to be $1 billion reduction in state revenues. We have a strategic options work group that is co-chaired by Dr. Mike Hoff and Mr. Jeremy Ross, that is comprised of faculty and staff who are helping us explore options that we need to action around as we prepare for what will be a unique budget landscape facing us in the fall. So we will hold a separate forum to work through many of those budget items, and many of these 12 pages worth of questions relate to budget. Tomorrow, I will send a memo out to campus outlining some of our first action steps to bring our budgets into what will be a new reality. We will formally announce what I've been sharing with people for months, that new and replacement full-time hiring is suspended. So a firm hiring freeze across the campus. If there are critical exemptions, those can be approved at the vice presidential level. I will announce that adjuncts and temporary faculty and staff hiring will, to the fullest extent possible, be suspended or curtailed for fall 20 and 21. Travel will be suspended. Stipend requests will be suspended. Major renovation projects and furniture purchasing will be suspended. And we are going to curtail contracts and consulting agreements to the fullest extent possible. My goal is to protect our full-time benefits eligible faculty and staff, and these actions of hiring freezes, travel freezes, freezes on temporary faculty, stipends, renovation projects, et cetera, are all part of a concerted action plan that will begin to implement to begin preparing the institution for what will be a new budget reality moving into the fall. So there'll be more information about that coming out to the campus tomorrow, and I'll hold a town hall on budgets later this month. But given that so many of the questions are on budgets, I wanted to touch on that before getting into some of the questions. So apologize for looking back and forth, but I've got questions up here and my camera's here. So I'm going to do my best to move through some of the questions. I have a question that came in from Megan Delaney. Megan's question is around individual responsibility, masks, some of the public health elements that many have called for. And what Megan really is, I think, striking at is how much she enjoys the on-ground experience, the ability to have personal interaction from being in class, and that is not altogether afforded in a Zoom environment. And Megan, I couldn't agree more. I miss our students being on campus. As I walk campus and see empty classrooms, that gives me a clear sense of loss. But I also know that protective devices are critical to ensure that we do everything we can to prevent the spread of COVID across our community. So I'm going to ask all of us to make some personal sacrifices so that we can collectively look out for our neighbors. So I know that there are many who may not want to wear these in the fall, but that is going to be the structure that defines our classroom experience until we're able to be in a position in which we've got a vaccine and life is a little bit different than it is at the present moment. As much as we'd like for COVID to go away, the infection rate continues to increase across the country. In Hamilton County, Tennessee, that is one of the national hotspots. So in order to ensure that we can safely welcome students and faculty back to campus for the fall, we all have to act in ways that protect the safety of our colleagues, our friends, and our loved ones. I've got some questions around scheduling. A question came in from a faculty member in the Department of Philosophy that between 9:20 and 4:30, those are the busy periods of class. And in between, students are moving in groups all across campus. And if there's a gap in which students have an on-ground course in the morning and an on-ground course in the afternoon, but a gap in the middle, what are we going to do to ensure access to technology? We will significantly amplify our wireless technology in open spaces. So for students who are gathering outside, we're going to amplify the ability to access networks. We hope to be in a position to open Martin, which has some large buildings, but between the Culp, the library, we may look to make better use of the dome. I shared this faculty member's question around open spaces, and we're going to do everything we can to ensure that we have proper access to technology across the campus to meet the needs of students who may be taking an online class in the middle of the day and don't have the time to get back and forth between their two on-ground courses. Got a question around general education courses and will they be offered face-to-face? So to this student and to other students who are asking about the distribution of online versus on-ground, as we're building out the schedule for the fall, we will ensure that there's a mix of modalities so that students who want to have the opportunity to take courses on ground will have that opportunity. Students who want to take courses online will also have that opportunity, and there will be some that will be blended. But to this student and to others who've asked about the ability to take courses on ground, you will see us here in the next couple of weeks finalize some decisions around calendar. We've got a calendar proposal that right now is being vetted across the campus. That would entail wrapping the semester up in terms of face-to-face instruction a little early. So once again, back to my blue, gold, and green, if you could just be patient with us for a couple more weeks, you'll see a little bit more clarity around calendar and a little bit more clarity around course schedules. Had some questions around accommodation for many of our students who have the need for accommodation, the need for mobility across campus to be assisted. What will we do to ensure that more of our buildings have automatic doors? I forwarded this question on to both facilities as well as disability services to ensure that not only can we make students with disabilities aware of the options available to them, but if there are individualized concerns, that we can ensure that we put together a proper accommodation plan so that you have the ability to have your physical needs met here at the institution. Had a number of questions come in around meal plans. How will we structure things in the COPE? Will we open up the ballrooms? Will we have additional food trucks? I think the answer to all of those questions is yes, yes, and yes. We will make some adjustments to our meal plans. We're still exploring those, the extent to which we may have grab-and-go options, the extent to which we're going to open up the cafeterias. The CDC continues to change their recommendation around food delivery, and we're working closely with our partners at Sodexo, both around our plan options as well as our delivery options, to ensure that when students begin to return to campus in August, all of those options are maximized to the fullest extent possible. Have a question from David Palmer, who's an out-of-state student from Maryland. David, greetings. As someone who loves Maryland crabs and Old Bay spice, if you could bring me some Old Bay potato chips when you come to campus in the fall, I'd be glad to repay you for the cost of those Old Bay potato chips. And for those of you who are from the DC metro area, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But David's questions are around what are the things that we're doing to ensure that students who come to campus are safe? Will there be testing requirements? What about quarantining? And how will we determine who is safe to return to campus? His question further goes on to say, on the flip side, are there enough resources to sustain a spike in cases during the school year? And would it really be worth sending people home or closing the campus down again if a spike does happen? So to David and to other students who are watching on the town hall, we are working through the process that could present the opportunity to test to the maximum extent possible all of our students, faculty, and staff prior to the return. We are doing all we can to acquire the maximum number of tests that allow us to test for COVID on the front end of the semester, as well as regularly throughout the semester. We've got to test student athletes. We've got to test students moving in the residence halls. We are setting up quarantine locations in the event that a student does test positive, that they have a space separate from the remainder of the student body so that they can recover and receive medical care and treatment as appropriate. In terms of that transition between phases, how do we transition between phase 2 and phase 3? There may be some periods in which we go back and forth throughout the semester as circumstances change and unfold. Just as in certain springs, for those of you who live in Northeast Tennessee, you know that if there's a significant flu outbreak, there may be a school that closes for a few days to ensure proper cleaning. So all of those things we're working through, David, to you and to your family and to other students across the region, we're going to every extent possible to ensure that we have the equipment, the protocols, the tests, et cetera, to create a learning environment that's safe for you, for our faculty and our staff. So I apologize that I don't have all the answers at this point. Once again, this is one of those shades of green, but we're doing everything we can by the start of the fall to ensure that we can test students prior to their move into the residence halls. I've got a number of questions here related to wearing face coverings. I think I've addressed that on the front end. And then that relates to internships. So for our students who have internships in the community, the protective requirements entailed within the internship will define the expectations for our students. For student teaching rotations, for experiential opportunities, for clinical rotations, we're doing everything we can. This is of keen importance for nursing, for medicine, for physical therapy, et cetera, to get a lot of those rotational opportunities reopened for our students because it's central to graduation requirements. But the safety requirements of those host locations will define the safety expectations for students going into those host locations. Got a question from Hazel Robertson in Public Health. Hazel, how are you doing? It's good to hear from you. Asking about more specific guidance on when staff should plan to return to campus. There seems to be some confusion because people are being told different things, even though the guidance from the committee mentions the 15th. We will do a phased open on the 15th. Individual units will define their phased operations and structure. The campus will be public facing in its operations by July 1. So that phased opening is at the department and unit level. That will be determined in your case by Dr. Wyckoff, who may take a different structure on phasing than Dr. Samples or Dr. Depew. But we will have rotations in offices, small scale beginning June 15th, ramp up a little bit beginning July 1. But July 1 is the date in which the campus will be open to walk-up traffic. Anything before then is preparation work for that date. Got a question coming in around the hybrid format discussed in stage 3. I'm trying to read through this question. Give me a second. This is a lengthy question. So the heart of the question relates to how will we structure hybrid opportunities and what does a hybrid course mean? In many respects, it's flipping the classroom. So if I were to teach Intro to American Government, and let's say I was in the large lecture hall in Brown Hall, which seats a couple hundred students, if I were to be in a hybrid format, I would pre-record my lectures in D2L. All students would be expected to review that lecture material and any other material that I put together in D2L. And then I would hold smaller group sessions on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, maybe in conjunction with the graduate student, in which we would facilitate conversation around the materials that were in those pre-recorded lectures. So it's different than Zoom because it provides the opportunity for face-to-face interaction dialogue. We may work through a problem set. One of the favorite things that I like to work through in a course that I taught on political parties is why do we not have a three-party system in the country? So we could have some dialogue, small group conversations around that broader lecture. But in those hybrid courses, it's utilizing both face-to-face as well as online modalities. So I think you'll see a broad utilization of that flipped classroom experience across the campus. But I also think for small lecture discussions, courses that are 15 students in general, and our student to faculty ratio, as everyone knows, is well below 20-to-1. So the bulk of our classes already were small. So this is not as much of an issue for us as it would be for a large campus who is reliant upon 200 to 300 to 400 student lecture halls. The bulk of our courses are by nature small. It's what makes East Tennessee State University such a wonderful place. So I don't anticipate that much of a disruption because, once again, the bulk of our courses have a small student to faculty ratio. Student also goes on to ask, will there be expectations that students wipe down their desk? We're going to do everything we can to clean buildings, particularly at night. But if I'm a student and I'm coming in for class, I may want to bring some wipes to wipe down my desk. Once again, individual responsibility, neighbors helping neighbors. I know that as I've gone through buildings, I've got Clorox wipes and I wipe down the door handle if I didn't have my gloves on. So how can all of us be good neighbors and help one another and model the behavior that we want to see, the best behavior in ourselves and the best behavior in our colleagues? The final part of the question is there a backup plan if there's an outbreak on campus? I'm hopeful that if we take steps to protect one another, if we model the behaviors in ourselves that we want for others, that we can mitigate the spread. But in the event that there is an outbreak on campus, then we'll respond accordingly. At this point, I'm not in a position to outline all the detailed elements of what that response would entail, because if we have 3 positive tests, that's different than 300 positive tests, and the responses would vary accordingly. A question around what protocol will be in place for staff members and students who don't adhere to social distancing and recommended safety protocols. How will noncompliance be reported, especially if noncompliance comes from a supervisor? What can individuals do to protect themselves? For those of you who've been at ETSU for a while, you remember a number of years ago when we became a tobacco-free campus, and we put in place a process by which we asked people to respect the rules. It took a while for that to catch on, but we are a smoke-free and tobacco-free campus. And this is going to take a while to catch on, but if we all model positive behavior rather than a lot of the negative behavior I've seen playing out on social media or in other forms of media across the country, ETSU has throughout its history been an institution recognized for doing things well and for doing them the right way. And I'm confident that we'll model those values going into the fall. So will there be people who say, I refuse to wear a mask because you're infringing upon my individual freedoms? Unfortunately, I think that will be the case. But hopefully as they look around, they'll realize that they're an outlier and we're not doing this to punish people, we're doing this to protect people. My mom is of an age that if I gave her age, she'd probably come down here and put me on restrictions, so I won't tell my mom's age. But the last thing I want is for me to do something selfish that would take my mom from me. And all of us just have to do what's right. This isn't about my trying to take away your rights or you trying to take away mine. All of us have family members, friends, or loved ones who struggle with health challenges, and anything that we can do to keep our loved ones safe, we would do. I'd run through a wall to keep my wife and son safe. And if that means I've got to wear a mask to keep my family safe, then I'm going to keep my family safe. And I know you do likewise for your family and loved ones. So let's all do that together. A question around that theme. For employees who are working on campus or remote location, what can we do to help keep individuals safe? I think we're going to have to be flexible. If I have a child with an autoimmune disease, talk with your supervisor and say, what can I do to continue to be in a position to work remotely? I may have to come in 1 or 2 days a week, but we're an institution that's demonstrated we can transition to online. We've successfully worked from a remote environment. And I know we're all going to be flexible. We're going to help our neighbors. That's what we do. That's what we do. That's what Appalachians do. We help our neighbors with care and compassion and empathy. So to this staff member in academic affairs, reach out to your supervisor, define your circumstance, and I'm positive that they'll work with you to help put together a structure that allows all of us to be safe and allows you to ensure that your child is safe. You know, that's a continued theme through here. I think we're all going to have to be flexible. Got a question here around the timelines of a specified 7.5-hour work environment. Question comes in from a mother who's a single parent of 3, and with child care issues and the inability to access child care, what type of flexibility will be provided? I think all of us have seen over the course of the past couple months, there's no such thing as a 7.5-hour workday when you're working from home. The day never ends. I love what I do, and I have a hard time sometimes turning work off. So I think we're going to be flexible around hours and requirements, because what's our goal? Our goal is to be successful, to ensure that our students have a successful experience, a gratifying, rewarding, and transformative experience. And we've all found over the course of the past couple months that flexibility, decentralized decision-making rather than one-size-fits-all is what allowed us to go online in 2 weeks, and that's what's going to ensure that we're successful as we transition into the fall. Good question, a lot of questions around childcare. So a question from Kate Emmerich, who's an OASIS coordinator and works in our counseling center. Kate, thank you for what you and your colleagues do to serve our students, faculty, and staff. Thank you for being a facilitator on a discussion that was hosted late last week around equity and inclusion on our campus. And your question is around what flexibility will be provided to employees who need to work remotely, particularly with employees who may need to work remotely during some office hours due to being a parent of children and not being able to regularly access daycare or school. I know your supervisor. I'm confident that Dr. Sherlin will provide that flexibility. That flexibility is a word that I'm going to use time and time and time again. It's a lot like blue and gold and green. We're all going to have to work together and help one another cover hours, cover responsibilities to ensure that we're able to keep the university moving. So I know that we've provided flexibility to date, and I'm confident that we'll continue to do so moving into the fall, with the understanding that there's going to be times when people have to be all hands on deck. But there's also going to be a recognition that those hands sometimes are tied, because I say to staff here, family comes first, and family comes first. As I'm continuing to work through questions, got a question from Dr. Fred Alsop around a buyout program. Dr. Alsop is a longstanding faculty member at East Tennessee State University, former chair of the Faculty Senate, the first faculty trustee on our board of trustees. He's the author of the Smithsonian's book on birds and also the head of the Train Museum. Dr. Alsop, it's great to hear from you, and I hope that you and yours are doing well. Dr. Alsop's question is around a potential buyout program. As many are aware, we piloted a buyout program in arts and sciences this spring, and it had a 40% threshold. Dr. Alsop's question is around whether or not there will be consideration of another buyout program for the fall and what those thresholds may be. Further goes on to say that he recognizes that workloads are going to be a little bit different this fall, and Dr. Alsop, you're right on target. All of us are going to have to do more to ensure that we're positioned to serve our students, faculty, and staff, and to protect those students, faculty, and staff in the face of what are some pretty difficult budget headwinds. But if you're familiar with the history of the university, that's who we are. At the height of the Great Depression, under President Sherrod's leadership, when the state didn't make regular distributions of state appropriations to the institution, we worked collectively to ensure that local banks provided loans so that we could continue to meet payroll. As we moved through the significant downturns under Dr. Stanton's leadership, everyone did a little bit more to ensure that our people came first and that our jobs were protected. So our workloads, our number of courses that we may be asked to teach, I'm going to teach in the fall. All of us are going to have to do a little bit more to help us get through this difficult time. But once again, as people of Appalachia, that's what we do. When there were tornadoes in the Camp Creek area a number of years ago, what did we do? As a campus, as a community, we went down and helped people rebuild. When the floods destroyed communities in Raynell, West Virginia, what did we do? Our students took alternative spring breaks and went to help rebuild those communities. So we all are going to have to do a little bit more to help build ETSU in the fall. And to Dr. Alsop's point, there may be some who might say, well, I'm not up for this. I may want to take advantage of an early buyout or an early retirement. We will put a plan in forward for the campus's consideration, most likely later this month. Dr. Alsop, I can't answer the questions with respect to the specific of that incentive, but I will share your feedback with the committee that's looking at it, and we'll see how that unfolds. A question from staff and financial aid around some adjustments to holidays. I referenced earlier in the attempt to address some questions that we have shared a proposal with constituency groups. We shared it at University Council yesterday. I'll discuss it with Staff Senate Executive Committee on Friday, Faculty Senate Executive Committee on Monday, and anticipate next week we'll communicate it to the campus. But I do anticipate some changes to our holiday schedule for the fall, potentially striving to end face-to-face on-ground instruction prior to Thanksgiving, and then wrapping exams up online after Thanksgiving, thereby affording the opportunity for our students who live in Middle Tennessee or Memphis or Michigan or Miami to go home for Thanksgiving and to be able to stay with their families in anticipation of what could be a second wave of the COVID outbreak that, based upon research that I've had a chance to read, may materialize in that late November time period. So to Christina in financial aid, we'll be able to answer your question with more specificity later next week. Had a lot of questions that have come in regarding the Child Study Center. And as I mentioned, I'll have a second town hall regarding budgets later this month. But I want to address the questions that have come in from individuals such as Ms. Kellogg, Ms. Lewis, Dr. Pettijohn, Dr. Chakraborty, and others about the Child Study Center. As we moved through spring and into summer, we, for all intents and purposes, physically closed access to our buildings. Based upon that action, coupled with recommendations from CDC, we, in addition to working remotely for the university school and for campus as a whole, we closed Little Bucks and the Child Study Center. We kept those individuals on payroll through the spring. Individuals in Child Study Center on 12-month contracts, Little Bucks on 10-month contracts. Both of those facilities are closed for the summer. So the actions that we took reflect the fact that Little Bucks is dependent upon students and tuition revenue to help cover operating costs. We've not yet made a decision around the structure and operation of Little Bucks and the Child Study Center for the fall. We are committed, I am committed, to having daycare and childcare for our students and, to the extent possible, faculty and staff for the fall. But the structure and form of that has yet to be determined. In a communication that Dr. Scarborough sent out to parents and others, she communicated this action and this decision. This is not a decision at this juncture to close the Child Study Center. But I think as we look at what will be a difficult financial landscape for our campus in the fall, we've got to put all of these factors together into consideration to ensure that we are making the best decisions for the campus as a whole. And that entails both our youngest students as well as our oldest students. So I know that there's a lot of concern among parents at the Child Study Center around what will happen for the fall. But I assure you that a final decision has not been made. But I do assure you that as we look for childcare for the fall, our priority will be to ensure that we meet the needs of our students, and to the extent possible, we'll then phase in slots if they're available for faculty and for staff. I don't have all the answers. There's a group led by Dr. Scarborough and her leadership team that's putting those recommendations together. And we can touch on this in greater detail as we talk a little bit more about some of the questions in the budget town hall. So I apologize, I'm not in a position to answer all the questions from parents at the Child Study Center. But just as the campus is closed for the summer until we hit July, the Child Study Center has been closed as well. And given that there are no students and no tuition revenue, we had to take the associated action as it relates to the employees at the Child Study Center over the course of the summer. I have a plethora of questions that have come in with COVID cases still rising in Tennessee. If this situation continues in late August and September, where does that leave us? COVID cases are rising, but not at the level that they were in March. In fact, the spread here in Northeast Tennessee has really dropped significantly. So as the state has transitioned through its phases, we as an institution are transitioning as well. The state recommendations from Commissioner Piercy are very different now than they were in March, and we'll track this all throughout the summer. Question came in from Mr. Lane. Are face coverings required outside space on campus? Yes. Unless you're in an office such as this by yourself, we're going to expect individuals to have face coverings as they move across campus. Question came in, when will we know what classes will be remote? Need to consider the cost of the dorm for remote learning. Would not be fair to wait until after the deadline to tell us. We're gonna have all of our course offerings up with the modalities pretty quickly, but we will open on ground, and the bulk of our courses will be face-to-face on ground, just as they have been throughout the history of this institution. Anonymous question, what happens if a student refuses to wear a mask? I've tried to stress repeatedly, be good neighbors, be compassionate for others. What can I do individually to help protect the safety and welfare of those that surround me? So I've been proud of the work that we've done as an institution throughout our history to put others first. And I'm confident that as we go into the fall, we'll continue to lead by example. Question here, if most classes are hybrid, can students come to campus for their on-person in-ground courses and do the rest from their residence? I hope I didn't misspeak. Most of classes will not be hybrid. That was just an example of how some courses may be offered. I think we'll have a nice mix of on-ground versus hybrid versus online. Question about how will campus housing look in the fall? At this date, our occupancy rate is north of 84%. On-campus housing will look this fall the way it's looked every fall. We'll continue to have doubles in the residence hall. Our residence halls will be open. We may move into the residence halls a little bit earlier. We'll have cleaning protocols and safety protocols and testing protocols, but we will have students on campus in our on-campus housing units for the fall. And I want to strongly encourage students to look at our on-campus housing options. I'm not saying we're going to do this fall. I pray we don't have to, But in the spring, when we transitioned to an online environment, we refunded housing dollars to students. More than $1.4 million in housing refunds were made to students across this campus. I doubt the for-profit residence halls that ring this campus gave students refunds. So that, once again, speaks to our values. So I would encourage students to look at ETSU housing as your option, because I'm praying this doesn't happen, but in the event that we've got a transition, I think you've seen how we handle our operations. Once again, we put our people first. Question is, will youth camps and clinics be allowed this summer on campus and in the fall? And will access to the cafeteria be available if so? We will have our ETSU camps, our band camp, our welcome camps for student athletes, etc. Most of our camps and places for camps such as Trio, Talent Search, etc., have already been moved to an online environment. Our governor's schools have been moved to an online environment. So we may have a couple of small camps as we hit the end of July, but our focus is on getting our camps for soccer, football, our student athletes, our marching band ready, as well as our bridge programs for students. We're going to have our camps ready. I doubt that there'll be many publicly facing camps as we move through the summer. Got a question here from Dr. Roach. Has there been any more discussion about guidelines for public exhibitions and performances in the fall? Dr. Roach, thank you for the leadership that you provide in Appalachian Studies, and thank you for the leadership that you've provided for our governor's school. And I look forward to being a part of the virtual commencement here later this month. At this point, the CDC has provided recommendations around gatherings. It is doubtful that we have large performances and large gatherings on campus this fall. I doubt that we have big concerts in the Martin Center. I doubt that we have concerts at Freedom Hall. It'll be interesting to see how football games are structured in Green Stadium. That aspect of the campus may look a little bit different. As much as I'd love to be in a position to welcome 1,200 people to the Martin Center in the fall, CDC best practice recommendations and guidelines are not at that point, and I don't think we as an institution will be at that point to bring 1,200 people into an enclosed space in September. But that will continue to evolve. We're paying close attention to the recommendation guidance coming out of Commissioner Piercy's office as well as the CDC. So I know at this moment in time, we're not going to have 1,000 people in a defined space, but we may be in a very different position in October. So I don't want to definitively say yes and no. Once again, that's an example of the green. A question around about health issues that prevent them from wearing masks. Lots of questions on masks. We'll do our best to provide more firm guidance around masks for the fall. I think I've spent enough time on masks. Question from Candy Massey. Candy, thank you for your leadership of Staff Senate. What date do we start going to stage 3? We don't have a prescribed date because the virus doesn't work on prescribed dates. We are going to put together a matrix that defines what I think are target dates with the recognition that those targets may change. Western Kentucky University did an outstanding job of taking their broad report and putting it into a digestible matrix. And I think you'll see that type of document coming out from our respective units as we move through June. So as we get closer to opening our doors for public traffic in July 1, a lot of that granularity around transitions from phase 2 to 3 will be provided with discretion to units and directors. A question from Dr. Peterson. Dr. Peterson, it's good to hear from you. Dr. Peterson is an outstanding faculty member, one of the leading researchers on our campus, and his question is around University School. Is University School still planning on an early July start? Dr. Peterson, Dr. Parton and his team have been working around the clock to develop options for the opening of the University School. I anticipate that Dr. Parton will release to parents and students a time frame for opening the University School in July. Those timeframes at this juncture do entail a July opening, but just as the university may make some adjustments to its holiday schedule for the fall, I anticipate that the University School may do likewise. So they may start a little bit later than that July 6th, July 7th date, but Dr. Parton is working through that, and his team's doing an outstanding job, and they'll communicate that to the parents of the University School shortly. But based upon the early drafts that I've had a chance to review, the University School will open in July. I'm just not at a point to tell you when, because I know Dr. Parton and his team are still working through that. I had a couple questions around stipends. You were mentioned stipend request, or you referred to University Honor Scholarships. No. The stipends are extra compensation that is afforded to employees. There are no changes to our scholarships for the fall. So our honors scholarships, our academic performance scholarships, our public performance scholarships. I apologize if anyone thought I was referencing scholarships. I was referencing extra comp stipends that are provided to employees for work that they do above and beyond their base job requirements. Also, to clarify, I did not say stipends would be eliminated. I said we would not be approving any new stipends going into the fall. A question around ETSU Elevates. We will relaunch ETSU Elevates going into the fall. ETSU Elevates was a wonderful reflection of the institution's public service mission. It was a chance to bring people together to really demonstrate the power of the university to transform our community. The pitch competitions may be a little bit different, but we do intend to continue with Elevates as we move into the fall. A question around will there be changes to the graduation date? I don't anticipate changes to graduation. Graduation will be the second Saturday in December. But the second Saturday in December is an eternity from now. I've joked that days feel like weeks, weeks feel like months, and months feel like years. So for now, my focus is on August. And as we move through the fall, we'll get to graduation when we get there. In terms of, still more questions on masks. Questions around when will we be able to use a CPA? Yes, I do anticipate that the CPA will be open for the fall. There may be some changes in terms of occupancy and capacity in that building. Plans are being developed around the opening of the CPA, but it is our intent to open the CPA to the fall. A question around student workers in phase 3. Do student workers start on phase 3? That's going to vary. There may be some students who their employment is central to our operations in phase 2. So if our student employees have questions about their positions, please reach out to your supervisors, and we'll be in a position for them to work with you on a case-by-case basis. So once again, our approach has been to take a decentralized approach to this. So for our students and our grad students, if you've got questions, just please reach out to your supervisors. I've got a number of questions about international students. Many of our international students have remained on campus throughout the summer, but I know a number of international students have returned to their homes. I know that because as I dropped in on courses throughout the spring, I saw students in China, I saw students in Norway, I saw students in Germany. We wanted to welcome you back to our campus for the fall. I've had some questions around testing and quarantine. All of that will be, I'll be in a better position to answer the specifics around how we welcome all of our students back to the fall as we get a little bit closer. Once again, I see the world in blue and gold, but as much as I hate the color green, I'm having to see things through some green lenses. I want to close where I started. And I started by intentionally taking a moment to reflect upon the great angst that I feel as I'm watching events unfold across our country, unfold across our region, and unfold here in Johnson City. I am deeply, deeply troubled by the things that I'm seeing, the hatred, the division that is playing out in city after city across our country. I've long thought that we as a nation would be able to rise and hear the voices of our better angels. But unfortunately, our darkest demons are playing in the ears of individuals across our country and are playing out in voices across our country. We're an institution that has led, and we're an institution that will continue to lead. I gave a call to action to the campus a couple weeks ago, and I referenced Dr. Johnson's eloquent words to this campus. As we move through the remainder of the summer and into the fall, you will see us continue to hold dialogues, open forums. You're going to see us launch initiatives that provide additional scholarships and mentoring opportunities to build out bridge programs, but to create venues and forums through which we as a campus can lead, we as a campus can listen, and we as a campus can learn. I know that there is division playing out all across our country, but I'm confident that together we can come together as a campus and bridge divides and minimize division on our campus. There have been acts and actions that have occurred on our campus over the course of the past couple of weeks that have just brought me great pain and just downright anger. I've been angered and offended by some of the things that I've seen on social media. But I've done my best to model my values. And I encourage all of you as members of the ETSU community to model the values of the ETSU community. People come first, they're treated with dignity and respect. Give empathy, care, and compassion. I recognize the privilege that's been afforded upon me. There have been many times in my history, in my individual journey, particularly as a college student, when I made mistakes that if I were a student of color, I probably would have been in a different position. I've benefited, and I quite often have a great sense of guilt because of privilege that's been afforded to me by my race and gender. My heart's been torn out as I've listened to students across campus share with me stories of things that have happened to them. I spoke to an African-American student last week who said to me, Dr. Noland, my biggest challenge is, can I get home? As a white man, you don't have to worry about that, but I do. And there's a lot of nights when I go out that I'm afraid that I'm never going to make it home. I talked to a parent who said, Dr. Noland, as an African-American male, I'd say to my son, you may come home with pride injured a little bit, but just get home. And I didn't have to worry about that to the extent that a lot of our students of color worry about that day after day after day. So my heart breaks and aches for the pain that our students feel and that our community feels. But I give you my word that we're going to lead, that we're not going to let grass grow underneath our feet. And as we move through the summer and prepare for the return of our students in the fall, we are going to launch a number of new initiatives that clearly demonstrate our commitment to leadership, our commitment to equity and inclusion, and our commitment to the values of this university. And I've got question after question after question that's continuing to stream in, but I know that I only have 3 minutes left until our closed captioning on this open forum comes to a close. And being cognizant of those who depend upon closed captioning to participate in this forum, I don't want to continue on and close their ability to participate. So as I referenced, there will be another town hall in a couple of weeks to talk about some of the budget challenges facing the campus. And I will also hold another town hall to work through and talk about a lot of the issues that have come in at the tail end from a public comment perspective regarding a lot of the tension and unrest and hurt that we all feel as we watch things that have happened across our country. But those things are not new. And that's where I really, really, really feel we've got to lead. That's why I gave the quote from Alex Haley at the beginning. How can we no longer sit by? It's time for us to act. And as the German author Johann Wolfgang van Gogh said, knowing is not enough. We must apply. Wishing is not enough. We must do. This is a place that is based upon making dreams come true. How can we make dreams come true for all of our students, regardless of race, color, creed, background? That's what we've got to do in the fall. We've got to open, we've got to keep people safe, we've got to model our values, and we've got to do. And we've got to do it in a way that Appalachians have done things for centuries, putting people, families, communities first, rolling up our sleeves, helping our neighbors, and asking the question, how are you doing? And listening to them, not talking over them, but listening to them. I hate that I've not been able to get to what is just a stream of questions at the end, but we've got your questions. We'll try to put together some type of maybe written Q&A. I thank you for participating on this public forum. We're now up to more than 350 participants. I hope that everyone has a great day. And please reach out and ask a neighbor or a friend, how are you doing? Listen and respond with caring, compassion, and empathy. Model the values of the university. And I thank you for your patience. I thank you for your patience, and I thank you for all that you do for our great university. Everyone have a great day. Godspeed and go Bucks.